Dungeons and Dragons is a multifaceted game, usually consisting of a minimum of 2 to a maximum of 6, 8, or even 10 people. When you're the dungeon master, you're typically running the vast majority of the aspects of the game, including things like creating the world, story, overarching plots, as well as managing the backstory plots and side quests that the players experience. But when you're a player, more often than not, you're doing far less. You're typically experiencing the vast majority of the story as opposed to creating it. And though your actions and choices do influence that story, if it is being DM'd, in my opinion, correctly, overall you're not really manipulating the future of the game as much as you might think. However, though, in such a case, what I've often been asked a lot of times is, from a player perspective, how is it that a player can assist in the, not necessarily creation, but in the aspects of the game that they don't necessarily have a control over, since most of the control runs through the DM and themselves. So as a result of that, I put together a little 5 option list, so to speak, in no particular order, of, in my opinion, what are some player behaviors that I feel are conducive for assisting their gameplay experience, as well as just general healthy behaviors that, in my opinion, players can exhibit to their DM or to their table in general when they are wondering more about what it is that they should be doing or could be doing, when they feel as though they're not having as much impact as they might want or might think they should, especially if they feel as though the burden or the roles are too one-sided or too uneven. First things first, you have to establish that Dungeons & Dragons, at its core, is a group experience. 99.999% of the time, with the exception of very specific solo campaign style gameplay, but that's generally not what we're talking about. It's a group experience with, like I said, 2+ people. You could see tables of 10+. West marches are massive DM undertakings. There's many different styles of gameplay. But because of that, there are individual things that everyone at the table can do to improve the experience for everyone else at the table, and of course the DM. As a result of this, what you see is that by focusing on those things, you can ultimately increase the level of focus and ability the DM has, which will then theoretically allow them to put the extra attention and detail that they want to, and that extra split attention that they no longer need to divide up, into the future of the game itself, resulting in, ultimately, what 99% of the time, in my opinion, leads to what you could call a better DM experience. Now, this means a more detailed story, better described settings, better described backstory characters, commissioning art, all these different things that ordinarily they might not be able to do because they're worried about all these other things they have to do, that when everyone at the table considers these things and weighs in on them and takes on individual aspects of them, can make the experience better for the DM, and, or at least in a sense, easier or less stressful. And so the first thing is just the easiest, right? Be kind. Shocking revelation, I know. But it's very easy to get into a routine where you're meeting weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, yearly, whatever, and it's a group of friends and everyone's having a good time, and maybe everyone starts as new players, or maybe they're all veteran players, and they just get into this routine of, well, yeah, I mean, it's implied, right? Oh, obviously, I had a good time, obviously everyone had fun, obviously it was a great game, it's all implied, I don't need to say anything. And to some groups you might not have to, but it's always important, even if it doesn't seem like you need to, at the end of a session, to just talk about the things you liked or the things you disliked, right? And you can talk about it as a group, you can talk about it in private. It's not necessarily like one way or the other, but talking about them gives the DM more context into how both you as a player and your character reacts to the events that unfolded in their game. Even if you as a player really, really liked something, if you played it in character as something that your player didn't like, they might misconstrue that as you not liking that experience, and then writing around experiences like that in the future so that they don't happen again, which ultimately would then rob you of what it is you enjoyed because you did not communicate in a way that was beneficial. And that's good and bad, right? You can say to a DM in private, like, hey, listen, we went against such and such NPC and he talked in such and such way, and I understand that the character as written is trying to do A, B, and C things. I really didn't like the way it was described, or the fact that he was doing such a things, or the fact that those things were part of the plot, or whatever. And then explain to them, and then they can either tone them down in the future, write them out of the story, modify them in such a way, or do something that would then be better for you, because now if you don't say anything and that plot thread continues, you're ultimately putting yourself in a situation where you're now suffering every session until whatever plot thread that is attached to either burns or is unraveled or wrapped up. And so you save yourself a lot of like potential burnout, a lot of growing distant to the game, a lot of things like that, And even those are like larger scale things. There are even smaller things, right? Small scale things like just saying thank you, reassurances. If you could tell they're nervous, like they're doing a lot of ums and ahs and oohs, things like that generally come from nervousness, not even like a lack of preparedness, just like I'm scared, I have this vision in my head, I'm scared I'm going to mess it up kind of way. And then that can relay a feeling of nervousness. If they're making art, if they're making maps, if they're making character designs, if they're building the characters, like if you're fighting a lot of custom monster, custom stat blocks that they're making from scratch, compliments on it. Hey, I love this art. Hey, that was super balanced. Hey, that mechanic was super fun. Like, even if you think in your head, like, oh, obviously we had fun the whole time we were playing, it's obvious we were having fun, we were smiling, we were giggling, we were laughing, still say it, right? Because there's no harm in saying it, right? There's no such thing as redundant happiness, right? People like hearing that people made each other happy. We're humans are social creatures. It's an enjoyed event. Like, we like that idea. So no one's going to complain that you're being too positive. So it's always good to say something like that. And then it's like, and then the opposite is also true. I mean, small things that you dislike, not necessarily in a negative way as opposed to a positive way, but in a positive, constructive criticism sense of like, hey, listen, you've been building a lot of custom monsters, and I've been noticing that like the way that they're built, my wizard just keeps getting downed on turn one because you're making these like super martial characters that can do way too much stuff. Like, I don't necessarily think it's balanced or fair that every monster we run across has 3 uses of Misty Step per day, Misty Steps behind everybody, and then kills me with a 5-hit multi-attack. Like, hey, I think, communicate, I think I might be being targeted. I think that kind of build negatively impacts my build, and so it's robbing me of a positive player experience. Stuff like that, These are the kinds of conversations that people, after they've played for a certain amount of time, they're just like, oh yes, the DM has done everything right. The DM has made a wonderful experience. They're basically reading my mind. I have no need to say anything, right? And it's more often than not, yeah, true. You don't need to see anything. No one can force. There's no gun to your head saying you must say something in every session. But it's one of those behaviors that if you can get into, that kindness, that like introspection is super appreciated by literally every DM I've ever spoken to. DM burnout is a huge thing. You can look it on YouTube for more popular public DMs. I'm sure you've seen it in private at DM guilds. Even if you do like Wizards of the Coast official tabletop stuff at like TTRPG stores and dice stores, burnout's a huge issue because DMs in a lot of sense feel overworked and underappreciated for a lot of different reasons, and it's just helpful for positive player feedback for that little nagging sense of imposter syndrome to not be there, of like, oh, one of the many things is my players probably hate me, they haven't complimented me in 6 months, right? Whereas the players are thinking, damn, that was amazing, I have literally no notes, that was a 10 out of 10, I can't wait till next week. But because they didn't vocalize it, right, it led the opening for that like nagging sense of guilt to be like, oh, I've ruined this for my players, and it creates this like cavalcade of issues, this waterfall effect of issues. Another thing you could do that's super easy, I say that people still have trouble with it, but it's super easy. Just be prepared for the game. And that sounds like I'm being passive aggressive, and it's only because I kind of sort of am, but have your stuff ready, right? If you're playing in person, all you need to bring is the stuff you bring every single week. Dice, your character sheet, a notebook. That is, and maybe a pencil. But that is literally it, right? So if you're showing up every single week, hey, I forgot my character sheet. Hey, I forgot all my dice. Hey, I forgot all my notes. I don't have any notes. Someone needs to take notes for me. Hey, I forgot my whole backpack. Hey, I was supposed to bring snacks today, and I forgot the snacks. And it's like, oh, and I forgot my wallet, so I can't order pizza. Like, if literally you every single week you're forgetting something, it shows to both the DM and the players that you don't care. Even if you do care, it gives the impression of a lack of care. And just that, like, if this mattered to you, you would remember it. The same thing comes from being punctual. If you aren't arriving on time, in person or Discord is a little different, but if you aren't arriving on time to a physical location, every single session, it gives the impression you don't want to be there, and people have lives, people have jobs, people have things they have to do. If you're playing once a week and you only have 2.5 hours to play and you're showing up half an hour late, that means you're robbing the whole table of 2 hours of D&D a month, because your lack of punctuality. And it's like, listen, I get out of work late. I mean, people get out of work late. People have to get called in, they get a shift, they get whatever. But if it's every single week, I highly doubt your boss knows you play D&D on Fridays and has decided he's specifically going to extend your shift by 45 minutes. Like, I highly doubt that. It's a lack of drive on your end. And the same thing, even if it's like a little extra step, right? If the DM is doing a thing, something like I do on my channel, if the DM is doing a thing where they'll pick a player and they'll say, hey, next week, you're recapping, right? At the start of the next session, we have a whole week of life between now and then. That people are going to forget stuff, life events are going to happen, people are going to go to work, people are going to do all sorts of stuff with their family. Your job is just give a quick 30-second to a minute recap of everything you do today, next week, to get everyone into the mood of what's going on. If you can't do that because you didn't do one, didn't take any notes, didn't care, didn't pay attention, it's the same thing. It just gives this vibe of a lack of attention and a lack of drive to be there, and it almost feels like you're there to check boxes to say that you were there, and not that you wanted to be there. Which at the end of the day is like, no one is going to be upset if you don't want to play D&D. It's just a game. It's not real, So if you're saying like, oh, hey, I'm eating into D&D session by being late. I'm forgetting snacks. I'm forgetting recaps. I'm forgetting my supplies. I'm being a nuisance because I need to borrow stuff from. I need to borrow DM's dice. I need to borrow this person's pencil. I need to borrow this person's notebook. This person, I got to get their notebook somewhere and then text them at night to get the copy of the notes so that I could transfer it. Like, if you're doing all this and you don't care, right? You're inconveniencing other people more than you would if you just said, hey, I really don't want to play. Can I just retire my character? No one's going to beat you up because you want to retire your character. The DM isn't going to be offended that, after 6 months, like, you're like, hey, you know what? A lot of stuff's going on with my life. I have a lot of personal stuff going on. I just really don't have the drive anymore. I don't have the time anymore. He's not going to get mad. They're not going to get mad at you. They're gonna. We're humans. We're understanding. The same way that there's probably been sessions the DM had to cancel because their work called them in or made them work late. It's about the give and, like I said earlier, the give and take nature of the game. So if that is how you're approaching the table, I would very strongly suggest like having that conversation with your DM of like maybe backing out of the game, even temporarily, right? He can come up with some hullabaloo side reason why your character has to leave the party, does some side stuff, and then if you rekindle that spark and you want to come back 6 months later, he could have something that happened in your backstory that, or in that side thing that leveled you up to where you are now, you jump back in the party, pretend like nothing happened, or they just don't want to do the adventure stuff and they retire and they have their money and they live their life. There's no negative to that communication. But it's like that's one of those things where like the lack of preparedness can negatively impact not just the DM but the entire table vibe, and like I said, in instances of being late, the entire amount of play time, which negatively affects not the table, but it affects you physically. You've wasted half an hour of your life when you could have been doing anything, waiting for this person to show up, and then conveniently there's 45 minutes of traffic every single Friday when they live 5 minutes down the road. Like, it's just a negative aspect to that you need to ask yourself the question of, if this is me, there's no shame in that, but if this is me, I might need to have that conversation about where I want to go from here. And that kind of daisy chains with the next one. Learning your character. Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is one of the easiest editions to learn. Arguably 5.5, quote unquote 1 D&D, whatever you want to call it, is quote unquote easier because they have dumbed it down. They've made everything very easily accessible on the phone, and they've pared down a lot of the wording, and they've got rid of a lot of the complex abilities. But that's a subjective argument for another day. The modern Dungeon Dragon systems are very easy to learn. And when you're a player at the table, you're only learning one of them, right? You're going and you're saying, "Hey, I'm a fighter. I hit things with a sword. I have XYZ abilities, and based on the character progression, you get abilities like once every 4 levels. So from 1 to 3, you don't have that much. You get your big level 3 ability, and then you probably really don't have anything from like 3 to 7. So you got 4 levels of gameplay to learn the one thing your character can do. If you're a spellcaster, it's a little harder because every 2 levels you're getting every level you're getting access to more spells. You need to memorize the spells and read the descriptions. You can always write those down into like note cards, but not knowing the character can be painful to a lot of DMs because it once again is one of those lack of care things. Because think about it, right? You're learning one character and you're going to play it from level 1 to level 20, not counting cross classes, dying, multi-classing, all that stuff. The DM has to spin every other plate on the table at the same time to the same level of expertise you have or better in order to keep the story going. So you might be going 6 months into the game, and you still don't know how your fighter or how do I swing a longsword after 6 months of sessions. Meanwhile, the DM has thrown a wizard, a warlock, 2 paladins, a thief rogue and an assassin rogue. He made a DM guild. He's managing your home base with a live clock, with an upgrade system, and then you're like, well, this is too hard. I can't remember how to swing a sword. It also shows a lack of care on your end. And life is busy, I get it. But at the end of the day, 3 lines of text after 6 months is not hard. If you can play League of Legends and remember literally any of the descriptions of any ult of any hero, I don't know why League of Legends came into mind, I'm getting salty, but you can remember your level 3 ability of a rogue, right? Like you can remember your spell save DC. It's a number. It's a number written on your sheet in the same spot it is, and it only ever changes like every 4 levels unless you get a custom magic item that says it changes. If you have that, and then the DM goes, okay, cast a spell, you cast a spell, and he goes, okay, he's going to make a save. What's your spell save DC? Oh, I don't know. What do you mean, don't know? Oh, I don't know. What is it again? How about look? Like, it's on your sheet. You could look for it. I don't remember where it is. It's been half a year. I, as a DM, would expect you to know. And now we're slowing the game down again. Because now I need to go, okay, well, your spells, if you can't find it, I'm not going to, if we're on Discord, I can't drive to your house and look at your character sheet. So I guess I'm going to have to go, okay, well, the calculation for spell save is 8 plus proficiency plus your dominant spellcasting stat. You're a wizard, which would make it intelligence. What's your intelligence? 17. Okay, that's a plus 4. I'm sorry, that's a plus, it's a plus 3. So, okay, 3 plus your level 4 character plus 3, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it's 14. And that took 5 minutes to get to pull that out of you. When if you just said, yeah, it's 14, because it's written right there on the sheet, 14. It's been 14 for 2 months. You've said it every session that it's 14, but now you don't want to remember it. It shows a lack of care. And the same thing applies to like primary abilities. The DM can remember everything all the time themselves, but that doesn't mean they will, because the DM is human. Like, it's more apt to say that, yeah, they may be aware of every rule in the game because they've read all the books and they've played a ton of D&D, but that doesn't mean they have perfect functional recall of every single application of every single rule. That's why there's homebrew at the table, and that's why there's DM rulings of saying, like, hey, we're going to do it this way, and then we can address it next session. If it's wrong, like, I'll double check later without the DM. Like, imagine if the DM every 5 minutes pulled out a book and did 20 minutes of sustained silent reading for every single ruling. Like, it doesn't work that way. So the fact that we have to sit there and wait for you to read your character sheet for the thing that you've already done every single session since we started playing 6 months ago, and you're making no intention to study it or to make like a shorthand or to write it in your notebook maybe just in case you don't have your character sheet, like the little things that you could do to make it easier for you, you aren't doing, which shows that you don't care about me and my time, or by extension the other players and their time. And that's one of those things that it also comes up that way. So you prepping properly allows the DM to focus more on storytelling and narrative, and not about knowing that anytime he interacts with you on something, he's going to have to literally pull teeth to get you to do anything, because he's going to ask you to do a roleplay check, and you're going to go, I don't know what my modifier is, and then he's going to have to do it for you, and you're going to say, okay, you fight this guy, roll on attack, and you go, I don't know how to do that. He's like, okay, then I'll tell you, and then I'm going to do it for you. And at that point, he's just playing with himself, phrasing, and no one is having fun because he's just talking to himself, because the person who isn't prepared, and they're not playing because they weren't prepared. And it's like, that is the way that, like, that's the absolute worst, obviously furthest end of the spectrum. There are much smaller things of just like a lack of caredness, lack of preparedness, just the forgetting whimsically, that kind of thing. And this is compounded, of course, with things like drinking, or if you're doing other things, easily distracted people who may have ADHD, ADD. Like, there's a whole spectrum to it. I'm talking about the worst possible scenarios, which is why there's a tinge of being upset, but if only because I've seen it before. And I value my time and my players' time. But yeah, that is one of the things that I strongly suggest, is just taking, like, if you print out everything on your character sheet and you put it in your bathroom, and every time you go to the bathroom, you just read it. You can read it in 30 seconds while you're in the bathroom. Every time when you go to brush your teeth, when you go to use when you go to take a dump, when you go to get a towel, just speed read it. After a week, you'll have it memorized. That's just the way human brains work. 99% of the time, that's how it works. And then anytime you add a new ability, tack it on to the end, read the whole thing again. By levels 5, 6, you'll be encyclopedic, and you'll know your abilities better than the DM, and the game will go quicker than you ever believe. Trust me. That does daisy chain into attentiveness in the general sense. Being attentive also helps the game go faster, because it makes everything easier to manage. If everyone's on the same page, nothing needs to stop. The clock can keep ticking. Everyone can keep going forward, and things can go off without a hitch. Now, if you're on your phone, if you're drinking a ton, if you're getting away from the table, if you're playing video games like under the table, or like if you're playing on Discord, I know there have been people I play with on Discord who, while they're playing D&D, they're also playing like Helldivers, or they're playing League of Legends, or they're playing Candy Crush on the phone. Like, it splits your attention, right? Which is not in itself necessarily a bad thing, because some people can drink and play D&D. Some people can be on their phone and play D&D. I have DM'd D&D through my laptop while I'm opening rule books and rulings on my phone and reading those while I'm role-playing a social interaction, knowing that social interaction is going to lead to a spell being cast that's going to lead to some sort of condition, and I don't remember the condition, and I'm pulling that up while I'm setting up the casting of the condition. Like, some people can just do it. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but some people can do it, and it's not a big issue. A lot of people, however, cannot. They have to put 100% of their attention on something or another thing, and they can't split it at least as good as they think it is. And so what that results is a scenario very much where it's like the DM says, oh, you walk into a room, it's completely made of stone, there's no windows, the floor is smooth stone, the only thing in the room is a door made of steel with no handle and no lock. And then you say that, and then everyone's talking, and then 3 minutes later, the guy goes, oh, I light the door on fire. Okay, well, the door's not made of wood, so it doesn't work. And he's like, oh, wait, it's not? Nope, no one said it was. Oh, well, then I'll just, I have moved earth, the floor's dirt, I'll just dig under it. Nope, floor's stone. It's like, do you need me to describe the room again? Oh, yeah. And then you have to spend 5 minutes describing the room again. And it's that over and over and over. Every time you enter a room, every time you describe an enemy. You describe an enemy as like, oh, there's this guy, he's wearing like black leathers, they're stained, he's got 2 knives in his hands, he's got a bandana, his clothing is dripping with blood, he looks like an assassin. And then the guy's like, heat metal. He's on what? On his armor. He's not wearing metal armor. But you said he's wearing plate mail. Did I? I don't think I did. Someone want to run it back when I did? I never did, because you weren't listening. Because you were doing something on your phone, and as a result, you heard plate mail because you wanted to hear plate mail because 20 minutes ago you thought heat metal was a cool spell, and now you're waiting for someone to wear metal. And I'm not saying it isn't a cool spell, and I'm not saying you couldn't cast heat metal, because daggers are valid targets. But because you aren't paying 100% attention to the game, and you've intentionally split your attention, you are actively slowing down what is already, admittedly, D&D 5e is an extremely slow combat system. So you're slowing down an already complainably slow combat system by making I'm getting personal again, by making the DM constantly describe the environment, the room, the effects, the outfits, his behaviors of the enemies, all constantly over and over and over again, including on other players' turns, because you weren't paying attention on your turn, that now when it gets to your turn, you don't even know what you want to do, because the things that you thought you could do, you couldn't do because you misheard the wrong description, because you weren't paying attention. And so that's another one of those things where it's about the experience of everyone at the table, dragging the already slow combat system to a crawl by inundating the DM with descriptions and questions and things that he's already answered, but you didn't hear because you just decided Candy Crush was more important for the last 5 minutes, even though you signed up to play like an interactive role play experience, is almost offensive in a sense. The idea that like, oh, am I not? And this is if you have the DM that takes it personally. I have been known to take things personally, but if you're the kind of DM that goes, I'm doing this thing, I'm setting this up, like if this is a big backstory moment for this character, and you bring in like a character from their backstory, like a name you asked for way back when they were level 1 and they haven't seen, and you introduce them like this is so and so, and then you look at them for the big reaction, and they're on their phone and they're playing Candy Crush, and you're like, hey, dude, are you the game? He's like, oh yeah, who is he? It's so and so. Who's that? From your back, he killed your dad. Oh, that's crazy. I shoot an arrow. It's like, okay. And it's like, you just like, the DM has put all this time into this hypothetical conversation, into this intro, into their outfit, into their motivations, their behaviors, their aspirations. What role do they play in the story? And you've robbed them of that big reveal because you just didn't want to pay attention. It's like, oh, you spent 5 minutes talking to someone who wasn't me, so I pulled my phone out. It's like, it's 6 people at the table. It's not a single player. Do you want the other 5 people to sit there in silence for 3 hours while we talk to you? Like, there's a certain amount of give and take that the social contract of D&D says there's going to be, I give you something, I take something. You can't take everything, all the attention all the time, and everyone else just gives all the attention all the time and they sit there like an audience. That's not what this game is. If that's the kind of experience you want, you could play Baldur's Gate 3. That's functionally a single-player experience, even if there's party members. That might be exactly what you're looking for, but the live tabletop experience of D&D might not be, if that's not something you can enjoy without having that kind of set of behaviors. And you, like I said, there's always exceptions, but you should try to work on behaviors like that, because those are not necessarily good behaviors to have. They're not necessarily healthy for the table. And like I said, they can negatively impact the experience of the DM, of the other people at the table, of their feelings of whether or not their time is being wasted or whether or not their time is valuable to you, and it could negatively impact their mental state. Like for a lot of people, D&D, it's like the end of the week is a Friday night. We just worked all week. We want to have a good time, and now you're bumming out the good time, right? That is something to be mindful of. And then, of course, being mindful in general is my final like big tip, right? There are other people at the table, whether you're playing a 2-person session where it's just like the DM and 2 players, or whether you're playing the DM and 8 players. There are always going to be other people at the table. Everyone is allowed to have a turn. That means they get to start something, do it, and finish it whatever way they want within the DM's rulings, without you or someone else saying something negatively. There are multiple people there. Everyone gets a turn. Talking over and interrupting others can lead to animosity, negativity, fights, like verbal altercations. All of these things result in the DM basically becoming a social navigator, someone diffusing a bomb diffuser, diffusing an argument, and this social bomb diffusal in a way that, because a lot of times you're all friends and your friends don't like it when friends fight, so you have to kind of navigate the conversation in a way where nobody's pissy, and it eats into the time of the table. It ruins the vibe of the table, especially if you're having like a good session up to that point. All because like so and so was stealthing as a rogue, and then he shot someone and missed, and so now you've got to make a cute comment. Oh, even with advantage, you can't hit the guy. Like, yeah, you could try to be funny. If that's your table and that's your vibe and you want to bust balls, go for it. But the average person, especially if you're playing at like Adventurers League or something and you're not super good friends, no one needs the chirping commentary unless they ask for it. No one needs it. So it's like, I know I rolled a 1 and a 3 on my advantage for a total of 10 against the guy with 18 AC. I know I missed. I feel bad that I missed because I didn't want to miss. I want to hit with my cool thing. I don't then need you to be the devil on my shoulder going, wow, you suck. That sucks. Your turn was wasted. You wasted your time. You've done nothing. It's like, I don't need to hear that. Because now that I've heard that, I feel even worse, and it kills my vibe at the table. And if I'm the kind of person who would snap back about that, now the DM has to step in, and they need to diffuse the situation, and they need to calm us both down. And it's like, that takes time. That ruins. If we were in the middle of a combat, then whoever it might be, people might remember who's next in initiative. I forgot what I was going to do on my turn because we just spent 15 minutes arguing about who's being rude to who about what. The same thing applies with rules lawyering. If I ask the DM, "Hey, can I do this?" and the DM says, "Yes, you can," I don't then need a third person to tell the first person, "No, you can't ask the DM for that because rule 200, page 200 of the PHP says you can't." More than likely, the DM knows what Rule 200 says, and they know that ruling, and they're letting them do it for a reason you don't know, because you aren't the DM. The DM knows what the DM wants, which is 99% of the time why he's letting them do something. Either because they're a DM who subscribes to the more rule of cool mindset, which I very much like, or because there are certain aspects that are not necessarily public information that are influencing the situation in ways that that specific ruling on page 200 of the PHP doesn't account for, and the DM knows this, which is why they're letting you do it. I do this all the time in my game, where I basically decide, hey, if I have a sorcerer in my game, which I do, I don't say like, "Oh, well, you don't know anything about magic items unless you cast Detect Magic or Identify. You don't even know if it's magic." Because rules is written, a ring is just a ring until you cast Identify or Detect Magic to know that it's magical, unless it's like obviously glowing for some reason. But if I have a sorcerer and their entire shtick is that they're like a blood, they have magic in their blood, I'll let you roll an Arcana check to feel, to vibe out if the thing is magic. And if it is magic and you roll high enough, I might let you, maybe I'll give you a name. Maybe I'll give you an effect. Maybe you can tell if it's cursed. It comes down to your backstory, how the magic in your blood works, how I've been playing it up to that point, and all these very complex minutiae that aren't listed anywhere in the PHP. It's 100% my system that I made for that character so that that character doesn't feel useless in certain situations, especially if it's a situation where there is no one with Identify or Detect Magic in the party. Because then it's just a bunch of people walking around too scared to touch anything because they know cursed items exist and magic items exist and they don't want to get hurt. And it just creates, and it slows the game down. Because I know that and I conduct a system in a certain way to avoid that, I don't then need a backseat DM yelling at another player on my behalf that the rule, that they shouldn't ask for that when I already said they could do it because they think that that specific rule applies in the situation when it doesn't. Like, it just starts fights. It just starts negative attention. It starts animosity. And it's generally just a bad thing that you want to avoid. I mean, unless you're running like an evil characters campaign, which I never suggest, you really don't want animosity at the table. Like, you want your party 90% of the time on the same page as like the good guy saving the world, or they're going to save the town, or they're going to kill the obviously bad guy, and you want them on the same page. That's why there's so many DM horror stories about like, oh, rogue steals something, lawful good paladin tries to start PvP and kill the rogue because he saw him stealing against his oath. Like, that's what so many DMs hate that. And they hate the alignment system for that, and they hate players like that. Oh, it's what my character would do players, because that social contract of like the six of us are here to have a good time, it's not a good time if you just try to kill my character for some arbitrary reason that you've decided. And that's why a lot of those behaviors are banned by a lot of DMs. It's because that's what it created fights. The fights slowed down the game. The games came down to a crawl, and then sometimes the games broke up and they eventually just stopped, right? The DM is prepared to navigate social issues as the DM. That's why they took the role, but it doesn't mean they should have to do it every single session for 30 minutes a session because people can't communicate and be adults, which of course is, in case you saw this coming, the big thing. Communication. Every single individual thing I've said here today can be summed up with communicate like adults. Very simply. It applies to literally almost anything in life. If you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh!, communicate if you don't know what the card does. If you're playing D&D, communicate if you don't know what your character does, or if you have a question, or if you think there's an exception, or what. I am not exaggerating when I say 95% of every issue I've ever seen ever for like a DM horror story or anything I've seen at my table, 95% could be solved if everyone just stopped and talked it out, like calmly and rationally from a base level of like, no, you're wrong, I'm wrong, just talk about it, right? Because it's like I said before, it's like if being late to a session is an issue, Communication solves that. If you go, hey, here's an email from my boss saying that he moved my hours from 7:30 to 8 and the session starts at 8:15, well, then it's much more reasonable. Obviously, we're not going to be mad at you if you're late because your boss moved your hours. And we know that you're not late because you don't want to be here. We know that you're not because we don't want you to lose your job. We're not going to be mad about that. And maybe we move the sessions to start at 8:30. Communication solves that issue. Hey, if I'm getting in fights or something, it's like, oh, well, maybe it's because, hey, I've really been doing a lot of reading on the player's handbook, and I have all these rules in my head because I've been wanting to DM a game, so I've been reading like page by page by page of all the manuals, and so now that I know the way that all the rules are written, it feels weird when I'm seeing a rule that isn't the way it's written. Communication solves that. Dude, you want to run a one-shot? Like, a lot of times with Forever DMs, please, they're begging to play the game. Please, like, dude, to next week, dude, grab any one shot, grab Ghost of Saltmarsh, grab something, read it up. When you're ready, I will play as a character in the game, and you get to be DM, and you get to do the rules however you want. And then once they're in the seat, once they're in the driver's seat, and they know, they're like, oh, this way he was doing it makes this go way easier. I see why he was doing it. And it's just like driving a car, where you're like, yeah, you could study for your driver's test as much as you want. But once you get enough hours on the road, nobody drives like they say in the book. People drive like they drive, and you need to learn to adapt to it. It's very similar. But communication always, 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 99% of the time, solves the vast majority of the issue. Unless you have someone who's doing it intentionally because they're just a negative Nancy, or because they're intentionally trying to disrupt, or because that's whatever plausible reason you could say. I can't come up with any good ones because I've never interacted with it. But there are people like that who just like to disrupt. That's the only time communication does work. And in that circumstance, use the other super powerful tool of being a DM. Kick them out. You're the DM. You can just go, hey, take a hike, and they can't say no. You're in my house. Get out. Like, that's where that ends, You're not a slave to anybody. Nobody at the table is a slave to anybody. So why would you let yourself constantly be talked down to, constantly diminished, or constantly interrupted, and constantly have your day ruined by someone who communication hasn't worked on because they're making no effort? Like, at a certain point, even if it's a friend, at a certain point, not all friends are D&D friends. If this person just can't play D&D and they're just making it worse for literally everyone at the table, go, hey, listen, man, I love that you tried this out for us, because I know you know how much this means to us. I really don't think this is for you. I'm going to ask you to step away from the table. But we're still friends. We're still gonna hang out. We're gonna go drink and we're gonna whatever. But just you're not on Friday nights, on D&D nights. Just don't be here. That's a completely reasonable adult boundary that someone with communication skills can establish, and then your problems are solved. And if they keep showing up, then maybe they weren't really as good of friends as you thought. If they're going out of their way to ruin one of the few things that make you happy, that doesn't sound like a friend to me. At least not. It's not a friend I would keep around me, at the very least. But yeah, those are like the big things, right? There's, like I said, the list is in no particular order, but these are some things that, from a player, keep these in mind and apply them where you see fit in a way that, like, not to correct yourself, because that implies you were doing something wrong. Sometimes, a lot of times, it's not something you think about. It's not almost towards ignorance. But now that you know it, think about it, right? Because these little things over time can build to make your D&D experience significantly better. By doing all these things, you'll find the sessions fly by way quicker because there's a lot less pauses, a lot less interruptions. And now what was a party that was getting through maybe like 2 rooms of a dungeon every 2 hours, you could do a floor in 2 sessions, like, because you're getting on top of it. Everyone knows their character sheet. The amount of questions of, hey, can I do this, go away, because you've read your character sheet so many times and you've memorized it. You basically know what you can and can't do, and you're only asking for special exceptions based on specific environments. And yeah, so, like, or the opposite, if you could be noticing this and notice that everyone at the table is doing the negative version of all these things, and then you could see how bad, like, it's weighing on your dungeon master, and being like, wow, he was smiling way more 6 months ago. Now he almost views DMing like work, which you want to avoid, because that's how you get DM burnout. And if you want to preserve the game, you want your friend, the DM, who is your friend. At the end of the day, he's your friend. He's just also your DM. You don't want him to have to work all week and then go, okay, time to go to that other job that everyone makes me feel like shit, and also I don't get paid, and I do all this work after work to prep for this job that sucks. Like, you don't want that mindset, because you don't want him quitting, or he's your friend. You don't want him feeling like garbage. Like, you don't want friends to feel like trash. So those, like I said, are my advice. I made this. It's very scatterbrained, but it's very. These are very general ideas that I suggest looking into and trying. And let me know if you see a big difference. Let me know if now that you've seen it, if you can sort of see the similarities, the differences, how it applies to different circumstances, stories that you've had, that kind of thing. Let me know. And then, as always, have a good rest of your day.